Hey, my name's Jonathan, and I'm a veteran.
Hi, my name is Daryl, and I'm a veteran.
My name is Chad, and I'm a veteran.
Hey, I'm Travis. I'm an Air Force veteran.
Hi, my name's Ashley, and I'm a veteran.
Well, happy Sunday, everybody. Hope everyone here is doing all right. Hopefully you have enjoyed the weather. It was a little breezy here, not bad. Jim, welcome. Thanks so much. Happy to have you here. I know you've been crazy busy doing a lot of traveling, so thanks for taking some time out. Jason, as always, thank you so much for supporting me and our veterans. We have a guest for you tonight who is standing by, and he's going to, of course, talk a little bit about his time in the service, as well as any resources that he might have. In the meantime, while we wait for a few more people to come on board, I want to let you know, so we're going to have Andrew Farrer come on as a co-host for a little while tonight, which will be great to have another veteran on as well. And really excited for that. Again, also, if you haven't already checked out the books from Lee Allen Deckelman, that's Internal Volume, please do so. The other is The Perfect Fucking Life, and that is from Jason Lee Morrison. And then hopefully we'll have another book coming out from Kirk Spradley as well about his time in the military. So without further ado, hopefully everybody is ready in the wings. Let's go ahead. I want to introduce you to Terrence O'Donnell. And here he is. Did I say it right?
Yeah, pretty close.
Sorry. Wonderful.
People have been butchering it since I was a kid, so I'm good with it.
Excellent. Okay. So, Terrence, now you have been in the Army and Navy Reserves as well as Army National Guard, and you said not necessarily in that order, but I wanted to make sure that that was accurate.
Well, it's pretty close. I mean, I started out in the Navy, and after Desert Storm, when they didn't need me anymore, I said, okay. So I tried civilian life for a little bit. Things kind of went sideways. I needed another job, so I joined the Tennessee Army National Guard for a little bit. Those guys were kind of ate up, to kind of use a little lingo there. And after it was right at 9/11, I transferred from the Army National Guard to the Army Federal Reserve. 3 months later, I'm on a plane to Afghanistan.
Wow. Okay. So let's go back a little bit. First, Jim said, thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
And so tell me a little bit about your childhood. What was that like when you were growing up? It was rough.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, my dad was a veteran, and he had massive amounts of PTSD issues that were never taken care of. So living with an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic, I say raging as in he would get drunk and start raging at everything and throwing things and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So my younger brother and I would just learn to duck when we could, and just evade and escape and do what we could do. And then I turned 18 before I graduated from high school in 1974. And at that point, I knew the handwriting was on the wall. My first realization was I had an out was when back in those days, they automatically herded all the guys in to one of the classrooms. Of course, we had a very, very, very small high school, so there weren't that many of us. But they made us take the ASVAB test whether we wanted to or not.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, well, that kind of opened my eyes. And next thing you know, I got recruiters all over me saying, oh, man, you got really high scores. We want you. The Air Force wanted me for their missile program, and everybody's wanting a piece of me. And I'm like, oh, so now I'm thinking, hey, you know what? I got options. So knowing that I could not talk to my dad about any of this, I went to my mom and said, hey, you know what? I want to enlist. I want out of here. I need to go. Of course, she knew that I was kind of a tumbleweed anyway, so she was all about it. She didn't really do anything other than teach me a few kind of take care of yourself kind of skills, cooking and cleaning and sewing, that kind of stuff. And she did it on the side when my dad was out so that he wouldn't really know what was going on. Meanwhile, I just kind of cruised. So at some point, of course, he had to know. We were getting phone calls, and I was getting brochures in the mail, and he was seeing them. And he's like, what's going on? And my mom and I finally sat down and explained to him. Oh, he just blew up. You're not going. You're not doing this. You're not doing all kind of things. So the big thing was we got to the point where he absolutely knew that I was going. There was just no ands, ifs, or buts. Okay. After maybe shouting matches in the kitchen about it, he finally got to the point where, okay, obviously you're going. I can't do anything about it because you're 18. You can do whatever you want, but I don't want you to go, that kind of thing. So his deal was, when he wasn't raging about it, he would get drunk and he would put on his good boy face. So he put his arm around my shoulder and his beery breath and try to be nice to me and that kind of stuff. Of course, I would rather listen to him rage and scream and yell at me rather than, have him breathe all that beer in my face. But, what are you going to do? But the big thing was, somebody had to take me down to the recruiting office because it was like 20 miles away. So he actually went with me, and that's where things kind of fell through the cracks because I wanted to join the Army right straight up. So he's the first office I went into. So I sit down in front of this staff sergeant, and he really had no interest at all in signing me up. He could care less. And I thought, okay. So I asked him. I said, like anybody at that point in time, we were all asking recruiters, what's the odds of me having to go to Vietnam? Because the war was still going on. And, we're talking early 1974. So it was a year before the war was over. And I'm like, he said, well, 50%. Said they flipped a coin basically at the end of basic training and your advanced training. Heads you go to Vietnam, tails you go to Germany. Okay. I'm thinking to myself, And like I said, he wasn't real enthusiastic about helping me out. So at that point, I started thinking, well, maybe this is not exactly the right path I want to go down. And I didn't want to go in the Air Force at all. I had no respect for them guys whatsoever at that time. So the only other option I had was the Navy guy. Of course, he was very enthusiastic. He was all about signing me up to do something. And that's one of those deals where, being young, dumb, and stupid, I didn't know any better. This guy couldn't spell my name, didn't get it right, so it messed up all the paperwork. And he signed me up for a school that I really had no aptitude for whatsoever. But he didn't care about that. All he cared about was getting my name on a contract and shaking my hand a lot and getting me down the road.
What was the school?
Well, it was supposed to be for, telephone repair. That's what he called it. Okay. It was actually an advanced, like ICMN, internal communications. But you had to have really good algebra skills and math skills for this, which I didn't have. And he would have known that if he had looked at my high school transcripts. There's, and that's where, like I said, he didn't bother to look at anything. He just did what he could to get me signed up in the discussion. I'm 18, didn't know any better. So I just signed my life away and said, have a nice day. And that, like I said, everything got botched up. Once I got in the system, they realized that it took them a while, but after a while they figured out, wait a minute, your name's not spelled right. You got 2 social security numbers. Well, we got to fix that. I'm like, okay.
2?
Well, I had one from when I was 16. But they gave me another one because my name wasn't spelled right. It turns out, the Social Security Administration figured it out after a while, and they realized that I had one social security number with 2 different names, and that's how they set it up. And so, like I said, it was a mess years later to get that cleared up. But to get started with, though, nobody had a clue. So I show up at MEPS and go to basic training, and my name's not spelled right. I try to fix it, and they're like, "Yeah, no, sorry. This is what it says on the paperwork. This is who you are." Okay.
Wow.
Typical military.
So how did your basic training go?
Oh, it was pretty much of a breeze.
Really? Were you an
Yeah.
athletic person?
Oh yeah, I mean, I came from a very, very, very poor working farm. I was very athletic. Well, I want to say athletic because I never got to go to any athletics in high school. Okay, when I was in high school, pretty much from the 9th grade on through, we worked on the farm. So you get up early, take care of the animals, go eat breakfast, clean up, go to school, come home, take care of the animals, and you're done, and do your chores, and that kind of thing. That was our life 7 days a week. So chopping wood, garden, helping in the garden and farm work and all that stuff, you're strong. You know what I mean? You don't know you're strong, but you are. So all of the PT stuff that they had going for us was a breeze for me. I just whizzed right through that. Of course, I didn't realize till later on in life that the Navy and Coast Guard, their idea of PT was pretty lame compared to the Army and the Marines. So, I kind of like, all right, whatever.
So what kind of things made their PT so different?
Well, the big thing was they were all about marching mostly.
The Army or
the Navy.
The Navy.
Yeah, all they really cared about was you marching around the grinder, holding a rifle sometimes, a lot of times not, and some push-ups, sometimes, but not a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, most of the time you spent in class learning all about ships and swimming and all that kind of stuff, safety training and all kinds of stuff. And then, we had our mandatory, what I call scullery stuff, and where you go to work in the kitchens or some other kind of activity for about a week. I worked the night shift cleaning pots and pans, so I actually made out pretty good. You go to work at midnight, clean up pots and pans till breakfast, and then you get to sleep where everybody else is out doing schools and PT and stuff. Yeah, we had there was about 4 or 5 of us in on that deal, and we thought, oh man, this is a racket here. We're gonna week off basically.
So you finish up with basic training. Well, first, I guess let me go back for just a second. Can you recall any interesting or funny stories about basic training? Anything that happened that you remember?
No, truthfully, the only outstanding part of basic training was that week off, really, in the middle, where, like I said, we went to work at midnight and slept and laid around all day while everybody else was out working. I had no problem at all with the swimming tests. I'm not I wasn't a great swimmer, but I did pretty good, which kind of surprised everybody because, oh, wait a minute, you're from a landlocked place. I'm like, well, I learned to swim at a very young age. My dad was one of those, took my brother and I out in a rowboat, dropped us off in the water and said, okay, there's the shore. Figure it out. That was his idea of teaching us how to swim.
Okay. And that was in Tennessee?
No. We lived in Aroostook County, Maine, which is about as far north as you can get without being in New Brunswick, Canada.
Okay. And so nothing funny that you can think of, no fun stories.
Nah, truthfully, no. Basic training was like 8 weeks of just running around, going to school and doing stuff. Swim test, we had a couple of guys that couldn't swim. That was, I want to say it was funny, but it was interesting.
Nice. Let's go ahead. Looks like we've got Andrew Farrer, a United States Marine veteran, and he is backstage. So we'll go ahead and bring him on. There you are.
Hey guys. Sorry I'm late.
No worries. Thanks so much for joining. Let's see here. I'm going to shift y'all around.
I can see some Gaelic up in that right there. Crana Beta.
Krona Biha.
Crana Beta.
Biha.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Let's see. We're switching y'all around here somewhere.
That's all right.
Well, as a boy from Scotland, actually 46% Scottish, my dad took Gaelic, and I Betha, Ishkabaha. That's something of life.
Yeah, Tree of Life.
Tree of life. There you go. Baha is life in
You
Gaelic.
get brownie points, Andrew.
Well, my dad took Gaelic, and he taught me one good thing about the Gaelic language. Ishkabaha, which is the water of life, which means whiskey.
There you go. Ireland, they call it poteen.
Poteen, yeah, that too.
So, Andrew, we have gotten through Terrence's basic training with the Navy, and that was back in 1974. Is that accurate?
Wow.
Yep.
Aha. See? So we are moving forward from there. So
Okay.
once you finished, Terrence, your basic training, then where did you get stationed? Or
Well, they sent me out to San Diego to go to this school that they had me put on the papers that I couldn't get out of. And that's when everything kind of went sideways badly, because that's when we figured out that I had no math skills whatsoever. So I lasted probably 5 or 6 weeks struggling really hard with that. So back in those days, they had what they call a self-taught school. In other words, they throw you all the material. You got to sit down and you got to learn it. They had a petty officer there who was the instructor, but basically he didn't teach you anything. He was just there to answer questions. And man, I had a lot of them. Well, it got to the point where I had too many of them, and it was obviously that I was failing. And so they had me go see somebody, and that didn't work out. So then I got to see the Master Chief of the command, and he was not a happy person. And he basically said, "Hey, you're done here. We're kicking you out, and have a nice life." I'm like, "Okay, well, now what happens?" "Well, you're going to hang out for a little bit. We figure out where we're going to put you, and we'll send you a set of orders and yada, yada, yada." I'm like, "Okay." So that's basically what it amounted to. I waited about 3 or 4 days, and they gave me a set of orders. They said, "We can't ship you out for a couple of weeks. You can do whatever you want." So I'm like, "Okay." So I hopped on a plane, went home for a couple of weeks. Then I got on another plane, and next thing I'm flying basically coast to coast. So I flew from San Diego up to New England, from New England back out to San Francisco, got on a MAC flight at Travis Air Force Plate, and headed across the world. Next thing I know, I'm in Subic Bay getting on a ship, and that ship is headed for Cam Bay.
And so did you know in advance when you got on that ship that's where it was headed?
Nope, not until I reported aboard.
And what were your thoughts about that?
Truth be told, I was more worried about, settling in and all the other stuff. I mean, I was just a young E2 showing up, and I'm in a foreign environment. Philippines. I'd never been there before. So I had to wait about a week to 10 days for them to show up. So I'm in the transit barracks there at Subic, trying to get through the day. Of course, you're working every day, policing grounds, cleaning up trash, doing whatever they want you to do. And then you get off in the evenings. And I met a couple of guys. We kind of went out for some San Miguel beers, and I kind of learned a little bit about the environment over there. Next thing you know, ship shows up, and okay, it's time to go. Like I said, as soon as I reported aboard and they got settled in and get all my stuff stowed away, I had about 3 days, I guess I'll say about 3 days before they took off. So I got to meet some of my new crewmates, and boy, were they wild. It was interesting 3 days.
So what kind of stories do you have of that?
Well, they took me out on the night on the town, and it wasn't in Longapo City. They took me out in a place where we weren't supposed to be, and said, "Hey, we're going to have a party." I'm
Been there.
Okay. So
outside the radius of where you're supposed to go.
Well, the big thing about it is back in the 70s, there was martial law in the Philippines. It's up until 77. So we went to Angel City, which was outside the perimeter.
Yep.
Like, okay. So
Hey,
that
Terrence,
was,
I got one question. Are you a shellback?
oh yeah.
So am I, sir. Thank you. I gotta say, as a Marine, I have to say thank you for the hazing aboard the USS Kearsarge, because right now my body is in a lot of pain because of that hazing.
Right. Yeah. Well, it didn't bring me a lot of fond memories either. It was an interesting day, but I didn't go across until 1977.
That's when I was born.
Yeah.
You're a youngin.
I am a youngin, but you know what? Hey, we got two shellbacks in this podcast. Someone in this podcast is a polywog, and that would be you, my dear.
Yeah. Well, that's okay.
That's okay. No, polywogs are great. We got to start somewhere, right?
Right.
Well,
But
this
I
one just
don't really-
can't swim.
Carol, I don't really see you shipping across the equator just to get a shellback card.
And she would. I think she would do it. Just to get that
You
card,
think-
I think she would do it.
You think I would?
Oh, you got all kinds of guts, Mom. All kinds of guts.
Yeah, you could probably do it.
I mean,
I sink. I can't swim. I sink.
Terrence, we went out to dinner last night. Carolee, her husband, my wife, and me, and we went to this great sushi place. And I have the fortitude and integrity to tell you that this woman, she would be probably a really good candidate for either OCS or she would be a squad leader at boot camp, definitely. She's got
Now that I could do. I've raised 2 Marines, so
she's got gumption.
Yeah,
She's-
and I've got
She's
third.
got moxie.
Yeah.
She's got
Yeah,
moxie.
I mean, my biggest thing, like I said, the winter of 74, 75 was my first 6-month deployment. And like I said, the first place I really outside the Philippines, first place we set foot was, South Vietnam. And it's one of those deals where I was on what they call a salvage ship, basically. It was a working ship, small crew, shallow bottom. So once we delivered our payload to Cam Bay and at the end of the pier, the XO and the captain went ashore, got some more orders. The rest of us stood out there at the end of the pier with a 50-gallon drum, fill it up with ice and beer, and have a nice time. I'm like,
Beer on the pier.
Wow.
So what do we do now? And all the old timers are telling me, well, no, just hang loose. We'll find out. Meanwhile, have a beer. It's like, okay. So we waited, and about a couple hours later, they showed up. Said, okay, let's go. So we all piled back on the boat. They set scene anchor detail, and off we go. So once we got out, that's when they made the announcement that, oh, we are going to be standing around down here, and we're going to be playing what they call interdiction. So they want us available in case any of the patrol gunboats got shot up, and we had to go rescue them. So I'm like, okay. So what does that mean? I'm dumb, young, dumb, and stupid, don't know any better. They said, well, basically, we just run up and down the coast. If we get a radio call for a rescue, we go get them. And, we have all the gear on the boat to pull them off the beach or whatever they got to do. And we could actually traverse up into the Delta just a little bit if they floated down the river, and we could go get them and tow them out. I'm like, okay. So again, I asked, what's my job? Well, he said, well, you're so new and your rifle scores and basic training were so good. We got a job for you. And they gave me an M14 with a scope on it and said, this is your new job.
Yeah.
Like, what? Well, so the thing is, there were 4 of us, and they made up 2 teams. And we're all, junior enlisted, E3 and below. And they said, basically, you guys are going to be running 12-hour watches. You're going to walk up and down the deck for 12 hours. And one of you is going to be a spotter. One of you is going to be a shooter. And while you're on watch, if you see something out there on the water that's moving, shoot it. If we tell you there's something on shore that we're going to pinpoint the target for you, shoot it. I'm like, okay, don't ask questions. just do it. I'm like, okay. So that was my job for a couple of months, shooting things.
Shooting things.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Okay. But the big thing was, after that was over with, we had a little trouble, so we ended up going to Yokosuka, Japan, to get some work done, and then from there we just headed home. Well, we did do a little stop in Korea, so my first trip to Busan, Korea, that was interesting. But other than that, it was refit in Yokosuka and head back to San Diego.
So out of all of those countries, did you have a favorite?
Well, I liked Hong Kong. I mean, so you got to understand, back in the 70s, I made 3 6-month deployments. Okay. We'd come back, do a bunch of stuff for almost a year, and then head back over again. So I got to go to these, most of these places, I got to go more than once. Always had a good time in Hong Kong, because that was back when the British still owned it. Busan, Korea was always pretty nice for the most part, except you had to watch out for the ROK Marines. Now, my first experience with them guys was getting off the ship, and after being at sea for a long time, I was kind of a little trying to get my land legs again. So we're walking up this wooden pier, and I heard this noise off to my right. So I look over, and there's a automatic machine gun muzzle pointed out of a slit on a wall, tracking us as we're walking up the pier.
Wow.
And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, where are we? I mean, I knew what it was. So the guy I was with, he said, yeah, don't pay any attention to them. That's just the ROK Marines. They do that to everybody. I'm like, and he said, well, just keep walking up the pier. Don't do anything stupid. Just walk up the pier, mind your own business. Once we get out of the gate, you'll be fine. Oh, by the way, there's a curfew. If you get caught out after midnight, they will hurt you before they bring you back. Just so you know, don't get caught out after curfew. I'm like, okay, and other than that, we had a good time. The Philippines was the same way. During curfew, if you got caught out after curfew, the local police and/or the local military there, whoever wasn't on the take, would shoot you if you got caught out after midnight. So just to give you an example of that, while I was in my 2-week transitory time waiting for my ship to come in, there was a guy that was on one of the aircraft carriers there, decided to stay out and make a run for it after midnight. And the police shot him in the back and killed him. No questions asked. He was out after curfew. He decided to run. They shot him. End of discussion. So
wow.
That's how bad it was. Okay. And like I said, us going up to Angel City, outside of the perimeter, where you had local terrorist militias running around out in the jungles up there. Of course, I didn't really pay much attention to that at the time. All I cared about was getting drunk and, doing other things.
Yep.
And I didn't worry about it too much. But I found these things out later that, oh yeah, you could have been shot very easily up there. So, okay.
So what is a ROK Marine?
Republic of Korea.
Yeah, Republic of Korea Marine Corps. So think of our Green Berets on steroids.
I've seen them once. We trained with the South Korean Marines one time.
Yep.
They're pretty badass.
Yes, they are.
All the Marines, actually Canadian Marines, the Greek Marines, the Belgian Marines, all those guys, anyone that's got Marine after what country they come from, they're pretty much badass.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I just pictured like this Marine looking, like hiding behind a rock.
No, they all wear camouflage uniforms, but they don't talk, and they got this hard look in their eyes, and they mean business. Absolutely.
Okay. So you come back to San Diego and then you head back.
Right. 1976, June of 76, we headed back overseas again. So we got back. My first deployment, we returned back to the States in March of 75. June of 76, we're headed over again. Another 6 months. And that was all humanitarian stuff. No war stuff. They sent us out, and we were running around the the South Pacific Islands, doing humanitarian aid stuff for islanders and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, the only really outstanding part of that was this. We were in the Marshall Islands, and our captain, who was a young lieutenant, and his XO, who was a Lieutenant JG, they decided they were going to have some fun. So they pulled up alongside in the lagoon of this mountainous island out there in the Marshalls, and decided to do target practice on the goats up there on the mountains. So they break out the M14s, they're standing up in the bridge wing, and they're shooting goats.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's kind of wrong, but what are you going to do? And I'm thinking, all right, what kind of an outfit have I got myself into? Because that was the same trip where we had the same crusty gunners mate that taught me how to shoot number 9 coffee cans at the top of the waves as part of my training to go to Vietnam. We had swim call. So we put the rope ladders and the nets over the side, and we're out there swimming in the water, and it's really nice and warm. Everybody was having a great time. Next thing we know, we hear shark, shark, shark from the deck, and all of a sudden gunshots start running off. Of course, obviously, we're all at this point making a beeline for the ropes and the netting and everything to get it back on board, because we have no idea. So we managed to all get up and get on the deck. Meanwhile, this crazy man is still shooting in the water. And turns out behind us out there in the water, not very far away, a tiger shark was out there scouting out what was going on within the water. So
Oh, wow.
it was kind of a close call as far as the shark part goes. But we probably would have been okay if the guy hadn't started opening up with a rifle. Like, okay, what part of stupid are you? All right. You don't shoot when there's people in the water.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Well, like I said, these guys were a little loose. And, that trip was interesting because I almost got blown up by our own people, what they call friendly fire.
What happened there?
Well, we went to this island, and part of what we did there, we had EOD guys, demolition guys, and they would travel with us. And we go to these little islands out there where the Japanese used to be World War II, and their job was to scout and blow up World War II ammunition. So they said, this is their quote, they said that they knew where all the stuff was, already marked. They were going out to just detonate it. So we showed up at this one island. We already knew ahead of time that these guys were going to go off the other side of the island. They were going to blow up some big bomb. They gave us a warning, said, hey, we're going to do it at such and such time. You need to be on the beach and all that kind of stuff. Well, in between all that, we had some free time. So about 4 or 5 of us decided to go off into the jungle. And we're looking at all these old Japanese war relics, bombed out planes and bunkers, and having a great time in the jungle. So then I checked my watch. I said, hey, guys, we need to get back to the beach. We got to go. So we got probably maybe 50 to 100 yards away from the beach. And all of a sudden, it was a huge, just earth-shaking boom coming from the other side of the island. So our first instinct was obviously to hit the ground. So I ducked down underneath the coconut tree. My friends dived down into an old bomb crater behind me. And all of a sudden, all this shrapnel just coming through the trees at us, dropping down on us.
Oh, wow.
And, it was a rain, just like a rain shower, only it was all metal. And all I could do was just duck and hope I didn't get hit. So,
And did you?
a little bit, but it wasn't serious. But the big thing was, once everything cleared and I realized that we weren't getting any more of it, I kind of stood up a little bit and hollered out, see if my friends were all right. And out of the other 3 guys that were with me, only 2 of them answered up. I'm like, oh, whoa, where's Mitch? Where's Mitch? Is he up? Please check him, find out if he's okay. And he crawled out of this hole in the ground and, oh yeah, I'm here. I'm like, oh my God. Well, like anything else, once we straggle back to the beach, we got a bunch of ring for not being on the beach when we're supposed to be, yada, yada. So, kind of made it interesting. But yeah, that's, friendly fire with that. I obviously would have never gotten anything out of that if I had really got hurt. or if any of us had really got hurt. And then that same island, the next day, we were back out on it again. Of course, you understand about these islands. There's brass shell casings, just you can pick them up by the bucketfuls over there on the beaches. And they're, they wash up on the shore and stuff. And you can, the guys were making souvenirs and all kinds of stuff out of them. So we're cruising the backside of this island, and the tide was in. So there was just like a narrow strip of sand that we could walk on, maybe shoulder width, maybe a little more than shoulder width. So as we're walking along, I tripped over something in the sand. So I kind of took about 5 steps and thought to myself, now that looks kind of odd. So I turned around and went back to look at it. And what it was a rusted old wing, Japanese or maybe an American, but it was a wing bomb from World War II. Still had a detonator on the front of it.
Oh, wow.
And I tripped over it. I mean, I literally physically just tripped over it, stumbled, and so like I said, when I realized what it was, I called my buddies back and said, hey, we ought to tell somebody about this. So we walked back to the beach, got a hold of the EOD guys, and they said, well, where'd you find it? I'm like, I told them where it was at on the island. Oh, yeah, you know what? We didn't know anything about that one. I'm glad you found it for us. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I tripped over that. I could have died really badly if that thing had gone off, and you didn't know it was there. Oh, that's scary. But yeah, that's kind of stuff that we were doing, back then. We did other things. We went to these islands where Peace Corps workers were there. Sometimes they would give us a little show. Being Peace Corps workers, they would tend to dress like the natives. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
But as like I said, if you were on the first boat in, you got a good show. Then when the officers would show up, of course, they would put some clothes on. But even so, we had other things. I went on another deployment, basically same thing, winter of 77, 78. Most of the time spent cruising around the islands doing the same thing, humanitarian aid, so on and so forth. Making sure the Peace Corps workers were doing their job there and everybody was okay. Our basic job was make sure that they didn't have any major sicknesses or health issues, because we had medical people on board. If there was any explosives that had to be dealt with, we had EOD guys that were with us and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes we, spend a little time there, show them some movies while the doc was running around taking care of stuff. So, it was relatively enjoyable, as far as it goes. The downside of that is that all Navy ships required you to be moving through the water in order to make water. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Not moving, you're not making water. So the bad thing about running through all these islands is you're going really slow, or you're anchored in a lagoon for a day or two, and you're not making any water. So water rationing was a serious issue while we were doing this.
I bet.
Showers were like non-existent. Drinking water was rationed, so on and so forth. It made life a little interesting, as far as that goes. But like I said, that was in the 70s. When we got back to the States, in between those things, it seems like every time we turned around, they were saying, oh, you need to go out and do this, go over and do that, or you got to go over here and do this. We came back, I'm trying to remember, it was right not long after we got back in 75. They called us up and said, hey, you're the only ones available. You need to run up and down the California coast and chase this Russian trawler. I'm like, excuse me? Do what? And he said, "Yep, you're not allowed to contact your family. You're not allowed to do anything. We're leaving right now, and you're going to go out there and find this Russian fishing boat, and you're to track it as long as they're within the territorial waters of the United States." And I'm thinking, what? Well, it turns out they were a Russian spy ship, and they were running up and down the California coast trying to get whatever they could. So our job was to chase them off. And I'm thinking, okay. And we're not allowed to shoot them or do anything aggressive. We're just supposed to get close to them and kind of let them know that we're there and try to stop them passively from doing something bad.
Just a
I thought to
posture.
myself, That's got to be one of the stupidest missions I've ever been on.
Yep.
We were gone for a month doing this with no contact with civilization, nothing. We were
Wow.
we were basically on blackout. So I'm like, the worst part is back in those days, everybody got paid by check. So these guys got families at home. They're not getting paid. They had to collect their money when we got back. So yeah, a lot of hungry families by the time we got done with that one.
Did you have a dispersing officer aboard ship, sir?
Yeah, we did, but his job was to go ashore, collect the checks, and bring them on board, pass them out. Later, when technology got better, things got better. But back in those days, we got paid by check twice a month, and the dispersing officer had to go get them. And
How much did an E2 make back then?
well, just to give you an idea, in 1974, my base pay was $110.
Whoa.
My take-home pay was probably, no, I take that back. It's $325. $325 a month, and I got a check for $110 every couple of weeks.
Wow.
Wow.
Yep. And then
Wow.
I made it up to E3 eventually, and I think I got another $25.
Wow.
But it went. I mean, I was single, living on the ship, so it went a ways.
Well, and the cost of everything was a lot cheaper too.
Cost was cheaper. Yeah, up until about 1980. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things kind of went downhill from there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, my first 4 years was spent running all over the place, doing deployments, training missions, basically trying to stay out of trouble, which I didn't succeed very well, and kind of go from there.
Did you get Captain's Mast or NJP'd?
No, I was fortunate. Well, no, I got close. Okay. Well, the big thing was about 3.5, 4 years in, I had made E4 by this time, and I was in charge of a duty section for the forward engine room. So that's another thing. Remember I told you I flunked out of that school, right? So
Right.
These guys, in their infinite wisdom, once we headed back home from Vietnam, decided I'd make a really great boat mechanic. I'm like, okay. So they decided
Okay.
I was going to be an engineman, whether I liked it or not, which I didn't like, but I had no choice. So like I said, I was in the engineering department, working down in the engine rooms.
Black hole sailor.
Black hole sailor. Yeah, exactly right.
Sir,
I hated every bit of it.
well, you guys, I mean, black hole sailors, those guys, I mean, you guys don't see the light of day.
Nope.
You're always down there. I know a Coast Guard EM, and he never saw the light of day. He was always down there. That's
Right.
crazy. Like you and bosun's mates are like, you guys are you guys like make the Navy. The bosun's
Right.
mate is the oldest rate in the Navy.
Mhm.
And EM is probably right there up there, right?
Well, I mean, they started, I guess boiler technicians, I think, are probably in machinist mates.
BTs.
Probably not older than enginemen, but still, them guys are even worse than me as far as that goes. I got to see a little bit more light of day than any boiler techs or machinist mates.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's them guys had it even worse than I did, and I thought I had it bad. But still, I mean, I was on a diesel powered boat, so we were like machinist mates and boiler techs in our own way, because we would, typical underway day was you're going to stand at least 8 hours of watch, 4 hours at a time. And in between that, you got an 8-hour work day. So your average sleep cycle is broken. And if you get 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night, you're doing good. And that's for weeks at a time.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it's worse because if some officer decided to do a fire drill about 1 o'clock in the morning and you're running 4s and 8s, well, guess what? That 6 hours of sleep that you were going to get between 8 o'clock at night and 4 o'clock in the morning, you just lost it.
Yeah,
Wow.
man overboard, general quarters. That messes with you, guy. I spent 7 months on ship, and I give a lot of props to the Navy. I love the Navy. My dad was Navy, and I had the best time on ship. I got to see what you guys actually did during like man overboard drills or general quarters.
Right.
I give the Navy a lot of respect. I really do. It was the best 7 months I've ever had.
And Terrence, were you on the same ship each deployment?
No. Well, depends. So you go to a ship, you're usually there for all 4 years. It's typical. Okay. So in my case, at the end of my 4 year tour, they tried everything they could to get me to reenlist, but all they wanted to do was send me to a subtender out in Guam. I'm like, no. So I had 2 years of obligated reserve time I had to do. So I got off active duty and I did my 2 years of reserve time, trying to figure out life, which didn't figure me out very well. Well, about that time, Jimmy Carter and company decided to get us into a recession. So I lost my job after 2 years. I wasn't married to a very good wife at that point. She cost me a really good civilian job. And I got desperate. So after 4 months of trying to find work, not getting any sleep at all because I had a 1-year-old kid at home, and it was a mess. So I just got to the point where I was desperate. So I just walked right into the Navy recruiter's office in 1980 and said, hey, I need a job. I need it right now. I don't care what you sign me to. Just get me a job. Okay. I need some sleep. I need some money. Just hook me up. So they said, yep, no problem. Hook you right up. You know, but again, like I said, at that point, I signed up. At this point in my life, I knew that I needed a stable job. So I signed up for a 6-year deal and said, I'm just going to stick with this because it's stable. I know the system. I know the rules. I can fit in again. I won't have to worry about it. And my family will be taken care of and all that kind of good stuff. At this point, I didn't really care how bad the job was, as long as I was getting a steady paycheck and I had health benefits and all that kind of stuff. So they signed me right up and off I went. I did a couple of years up in Long Beach, California, running around on tugboats. And then after that, 1982, my dad was in very poor health. And of course, I hadn't been home in like forever. So I decided to see if they would let me go to the East Coast. It was a big mistake, probably one of the biggest, worst decisions I ever made. Oh. But I did it anyway, simply because I was concerned about my family. So off we go. Shipped myself off to a really, really bad command out on the East Coast. And, you know, yes, I got to spend a little time with my dad before he died. But at the same time, it was a mess. It was the worst 4 years I ever spent in my life. It nearly killed me. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Nearly
Where was
killed
it?
me from fatigue, stress, fatigue, no sleep, just constant go, go, go. So it was what we were at a classified installation out near Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. Okay? All right. Now, there's a Navy base out there that nobody's supposed to know about. All right. And if you're a Marine, you might know about it because you
I know about it. I knew about that base.
But the rest of the world's not supposed to know about it. Okay. So I spent 4 years there. But the problem is, out of 48 months at that duty station, I spent 10 of it at home. The rest of it was gone. I was either overseas or floating around out doing stuff, but never home. Okay. So obviously that affected home life a lot. But this time I had a second child. And it was a mess with me not being able to get home and handle things. So things fell apart there. Secondly, the stress and everything else that I was going through, that they put me through, it really messed me up pretty badly. So, I don't really want to go too much into that because a lot of it, everything we did was classified. Everywhere we went is classified to this day. I can't even tell you the name of the ship, even though it's no longer in commission, because it's classified. But the end result was I ended up, at the end of that time, they told me, okay, you have maxed yourself out on sea time, bonus time, you name it, you got it, you've maxed yourself out. You need to go somewhere else and kind of do something else for a change. So no more sea duty for you for a while. So I'm like, all right, okay, well, now what? So they said, well, you got a choice. You can be a recruiter or you can be an instructor. Or you can be an instructor, you can be a recruiter. Which one you want? I'm like, okay. Well, I'd heard horror stories about recruiting. So I said, okay, I'll volunteer for instructor duty. So they sent me up to Great Lakes, Illinois for instructor duty. It's supposed to be a 3-year gig. And the big thing is, back in those days, in the early 80s, the Navy started coming out with this program called Enlisted Surface Warfare. Everybody had to get qualified. Well, that was the other part of my stress factor on this ship, was that I was in such high demand for all the things they wanted me to do. I could never stand still long enough to get all my qualifications for this magical pin. Well, while all this was going on, the Navy department decided to make it mandatory for you to get promoted. You had to have this pin. So I'm like, okay. So when I got to Great Lakes, the first thing they asked me was, how come you don't have your ESW pin? And I'm like, well, I started it, but I never got the time to finish it. Oh, okay. Well, you're obviously not going to get it here. Yeah, well, whatever, I don't care. So they put me to work. I did, I was a really great instructor, but it was supposed to be a 3-year deal. Well, I was doing such a good job, and I got involved with a new program up there. They decided not to let me go. So they voluntarily extended me another year. So I ended up doing 4 years over there, which didn't fare well. But it was the bad thing about places like that is they're very political. Okay. On a ship, you don't have much politics. Everybody knows their job. You do what you got to do, and it's all there. You get into the rear where you're in garrison, then you got the politics.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody wants to be a somebody, and they don't mind stepping on somebody to get to be a somebody. And we had a lot of that going on up there at Great Lakes. I did my best to stay out of the way of all that, but invariably it caught up with me. So about a little over 3 years in after they had extended me, and I was in this special program teaching this new special course, I got a new boss. The one I had, the one that hit, my boss, there was 3 of us that got involved with this program. And we wrote the program, set it up, got it blessed by Washington, D.C., went through the whole thing. We're teaching it. Well, my boss got transferred when his time to rotate went out. I got a new boss, and he was one of those climbers, okay? He was going to be the best. He was looking for his next star, so on and so forth. He was a chief, but he wanted to be a senior. Then he wanted to be a master, all that kind of stuff. And again, he wasn't about stepping on toes to get there. Well, his biggest problem was he had no idea about this, this curriculum that we were teaching. So I had to teach him, and he didn't take to that too well because I was only an E6. I shouldn't be the one to be teaching him this. I'm like, well, I'm the senior, I'm the lead petty officer here. I'm the one who brought this thing from start to finish. I don't know who else you're going to learn from, because the other guy that was in on a program with us, he also had transferred out. I was the only one left. I said, I don't know who you're going to learn it from because I'm the only one here. I said, you can learn from me if you want to. I said, or not. I don't really care. I said, but it's up to you. I said, I'm not going to do anything, to rock the boat, but I'll teach you about this, this particular project, and you can take it from there. Well, he didn't take it very well, but he realized he didn't really have a lot of choice. So again, we didn't get along so great. So I just did my best to stay out of his way. So things got to the point where I got involved with some shady stuff on the backside, had nothing to do with teaching the course. And I followed orders, did what I had to do. Well, it kind of left this guy out in the cold. So he didn't like that very much. So he decided I had to go. So he went and complained, and the guy he complained to was another one of those climbers. And so between the two of them, they decided that, okay, I've been there long enough, time for me to find a new job, get out of everybody's hair, yada, 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 So they sent me to some backwater little thing. So the only thing that really saved me was that there was a senior chief who was in charge of all of everything. And he knew what happened, and he sided with me, I mean, I had gotten a couple of medals out of him, and he had sided with me. He told me, he says, look, he said, I can't do anything about them guys upstairs. They obviously don't like you anymore. I'm going to put you in a nice, soft, cushy job. You're getting ready to transfer out of here anyway. I'm like, okay, that works. And that way I stayed out of everybody's hair. And when it came time for me to transfer, I quietly moved out the back door, and that was the end of that. The only downside was I was single now at this point. My first wife decided that enough was enough. She took her powder and took off and left me, that's another story. But I was single. So when the Navy Department decided, oh, this guy's single, but he's coming out of Great Lakes off this extension, which means that we promised that he could go anywhere he wanted to. As long as there was an opening for me, you want it, you got it. You got first dibs. So I said, get me out of the country. Get me as far away from the United States as you could possibly get me. So here we are. It's 1990. Guess what's going on in 1990? Desert Shield. So I got my orders overseas. First thing I know, right after Christmas of 1990, I'm shipping out to Bahrain.
Wow.
A small boat unit that was on temporary duty in Bahrain and Qatar. And, I spent about close to 3 months doing all kinds of more classified stuff, doing things that, I probably will never be able to talk about. And, and when it was over with, they said, okay, well, you're on a 1-year tour. We're going to send you to the rear. You're going to still be out here. We're keeping you out here in the desert, but you won't have to be running around, in dangerous places anymore. Your crew can sit by the side and, so they set me up in this backwater place. I had a beachfront condo and I just puddled around for the rest of my tour. Well, at the end of that 1-year tour, it's now 1991 and 92. So I'm up for orders again. Well, there was this Navy lieutenant commander up in the Gulf on another classified ship. And he found out that I was in the area. And of course, I was one of the top enginemen, even though I wasn't the chief yet. I was one of the top enginemen in that part of the world. He found out where I was at. He said, gotcha. I need you. I'm requesting you by name. So I didn't really have a whole lot of choice about where my second tour was going to be. So I ended up doing a second 12-month tour up in the Persian Gulf on another classified installation, a floating merchant marine ship. It was painted white, no insignias, no flags. We just went all kinds of places up there that most normal Navy ships are not allowed to go. And we did some stuff that, like I said, I can't talk about. And I spent a year doing that. Now, at the end of 92, we rotated back. At this point, they decided, okay, you've been overseas long enough. You need to come back to the United States. I'm like, I don't really want to go back to the United States. We don't have any choice. You have to come back to the United States. Okay. So my initial contract at this point was nearly up, and they stuck me on this piece of junk in San Diego, and that's exactly what it was. It was a floating piece of junk, and they expected me to fix everything, and they didn't give me any kind of a crew to do it with. And I went to work for a chief who didn't care because he was leaving. So I'm like, okay, now what? What am I going to do? Well, that was back 93 when they were riffing everybody after Desert Storm. So turns around, they started doing that. So they gutted my shop. They took all my petty officers, and they were going to take me. And they said, okay, you guys are on the out program. We don't need you anymore. You got a choice. You can take the variable, I forget they call it the V program, where you take a trickle of money, or you can take the lump sum, or you can take the payout over however many months it is. But either way, you're getting out and you're going to lose all your benefits. I'm like, no. I'm a Vietnam vet. You are not taking my benefits. No. So they were insistent that we were all going to get in on this program, whether we liked it or not. So I decided to go off the boat and talk to somebody. And it turns out I talked to a career counselor, and he told me, no, you being a Vietnam vet, he said, you're covered under the old Vietnam era GI Bill. He said, you definitely don't want to lose that. So your best option, he said, is if your contract's coming up for renewal, the summer of 93, just go into reserves. He said, if you go in the active reserves, you'll preserve your benefits. If you let them talk you into an early out or early retirement, you're going to lose all kinds of money, and they're going to bounce you into the Montgomery GI Bill program, and you're going to lose just about everything. So I took his advice. Summer of 93, my contract came up. They just thought I was going to re-enlist and, go for it. And I had 17 years in at this point. And they just automatically thought I was just going to do whatever do what I was told. And I see ya. No. Oh, man, they were mad. Boy, were they mad. And the thing is, I did the right thing, though, because about a year later, they decommissioned the ship. And everybody that was on that ship that was, E6, E7, they told them, mostly E6 and below, E5, E6, they told them, you're out. E6s that were within the 18 to 20 year mark, they gave them early retirement. So you lost money. You weren't going to go to 20. They weren't going to let you. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad I did what I did, because I went and did a little bit of reserve time. And then about a year or so later, I moved to Tennessee. At that point, that's when I decided, okay, the Army National Guard, let me switch out, and kind of went from there. But that was, the Army National Guard was not what I thought it was. I will tell you that.
How is it different?
Well, the big thing about it is, I don't know if you ever watch TV shows of meatball outfits like Gomer Pyle. Okay.
Oh yeah.
The Army version of Gomer Pyle. Okay. And I got stuck with one of those kind of units. Their idea of a 2-week training in the summer was taking all our hibachis and barbecues, stick them in the truck, go up there and hang out and do things for 2 weeks, sleep in tents and have a good time. And, that was the end of it. Well, in my case, things were starting to get a little warm over in the Middle East at this point. And so they decided, instead of sending everybody up to the training grounds in Louisville, Kentucky, that particular year, it was, my turn in the box. They sent everybody down to Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Savannah,
Yeah.
Georgia, my
Savannah,
hometown.
Georgia.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Well, the big thing about that is very hot and sweaty down there.
Yes, it is.
And nobody liked it. And the worst part was the training cadre down there wasn't letting anybody do anything fun. No barbecues, no nothing. And these guys were hating life. And I'm like, okay, this reminds me of active duty. It's the way it's supposed to be. Well, they didn't like me because I was treating it like active duty. I'm like, I don't, what don't you understand? Oh, no, this is not how we do things. I'm like, excuse me? So obviously when my contract with that unit came up, I switched. Again, my timing was poor because I transferred from the Tennessee 278th Armored Cavalry over to the 489th Civil Affairs Unit in Knoxville, Tennessee in September of 2001.
Oh my.
Yeah. And like I said, 3 months later, the 489th was on a plane. Well, first we went on a bus to Fort Bragg, and then a month later we were on a plane to Afghanistan. So I got to spend, my last deployment was a year in Afghanistan in 2002.
Hey, Terrence, I love this. The fact that, you were in Vietnam, you were in Desert Storm, and you were in Afghanistan. I
was in more than that. We were in the Beirut in '83 picking up.
Beirut '83. Oh my gosh. When we lost 225 Marines in one day. I mean,
that's what my job was when we first got there. Helping the boys go home.
Oh God.
I was running logistics. We were running supply stuff. Out of that unit that I told you about. Over in out by Fort Monmouth. So we deployed to go overseas. We sat off the coast of Grenada, waited for them to finish up. And then once they were done in Grenada, we headed to Beirut. But the big thing was once we got there, we unloaded the boats, and that was our first job, was filling up the well deck full of body bags, taking them out to the ship so they could fly them home.
Well, those guys, that was 1-8. They are called the Beirut Battalion because they lost most of those guys. And I was 3-8. So 8th Marine Regiment. That's our sister battalion. And there's a big monument at Camp Lejeune for the Beirut guys.
Yeah.
And we looked up to 1-8 because when I went to Iraq, we switched out with 1-8. So they were going home. We were taking their place, but we had a lot of respect for 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, and those guys are. I'm glad you took care of them.
Yeah, well, we did our best. You know, and the thing is, we spent 6 months there, and you know that was our first mission basically. But once that was finished, we spent the rest of the time running mail, sodas, food, and everything else to the guys that were still there. And that's pretty much what we did the whole time, in between taking pot shots from the local militias over there around the Beirut airport. You know, that's the other part. So we were a NATO peacekeeping force. We weren't U.S. Navy. Okay.
I hope you got the NATO medal for that.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
But the big thing about it was they pushed that on us, and they drilled it into us. You are a NATO peacekeeping force. You're not allowed to do any kind of aggressive behavior. You're not allowed to do this. Just do your job, so on and so forth. So we would bring the stuff in, and while we're unloading, every once in a while, somebody across the other side would get in one of the bombed out buildings over there and decide to take a pot shot at us. So all we have now, I don't know if you remember back in the old days when you had the Kevlar vest that had the real collars like these.
That's the Korean War vets.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, they got us. Yeah.
If you've ever got sand and salt down inside that collar and you can't take that thing off, okay, you have a red rash like you wouldn't believe. Okay. We had no weapons. All right, we're not allowed to carry weapons. We had them on the boat, but they were locked. Okay. The only way we could break them out is if they tried to rush the boat and get on. We're like, well, by the time we get the weapons out, they're going to be all over us. We're like a half a dozen guys here. If you rush the boat in that kind of a deal, we're dead. Okay, before we can ever get a rifle out. So we just laughed, But like I said, we would pull in, and then once in a while, we'd hear a bullet spang off the metal somewhere. In our first real deal with that was we pulled up and we were circling around waiting for them to give us the green light to go in. So we had these really big binoculars, and we're watching the Marines that are down in the slit trenches down there with the sandbags. So every once in a while, you couldn't hear anything. But if you watch really, really careful, you could watch those sandbags and you'd see a little puff of sand come up. So those guys were getting shot at, but they were not allowed to shoot back. Here's a bunch of Marines down in the trenches, down like this, with bullets hitting the sandbags over their heads. And that's all they could do was hunker down with their rifles. Not allowed to
shoot back. That's terrible. That's a wasted Marine right there.
Right. Exactly.
We were NATO peacekeepers.
Well, Terrence, you've been all these places. I have to ask this question because it would be remiss of me as a VFW certified national recruiter.
I knew this was coming.
To actually ask you, are you a member of the VFW?
No. I am a member of the American Legion, though.
Well, yes, so am I. But you qualify for the VFW, four times over.
Yeah.
Okay. Just letting you know.
Yeah, no, that's good because in '85 they sent us back overseas again, and they had us chase terrorists around Southern Europe and North Africa. So.
Oh Lord, have mercy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Goodness.
That's amazing. I'm sorry, Carolee. I'm just amazed at this gentleman right here because that's some great stories you got there, Terrence.
Well, think about it. In '85, nothing was really happening except that in Southern Europe, going on then around the Mediterranean, they had this group of communist terrorists called the Red Band, or Red Hand, or something like that. Their signature was a piece of white cotton with a bloody red painted handprint on it. And whenever they would kidnap somebody, they'd leave their calling card. So our job was to go find these people. Again, no weapons. The command's idea of finding these people was to take your squadron size, in my case, my shop people, and 5 or 6 of us, and we would get together and we were told, all right, this is your time to go. So it wasn't really liberty that we got to go on. It was a structured go ashore, go here, go there. If you find these people, radio it in, call it in, come back with it, whatever. Your job is to scout these people out. And in part of that, they said, if you go into an establishment that you know these people are in the area, make sure you guys don't sit anywhere near any windows or any doors, because they like to roll hand grenades in through the front doors. And I'm like, okay. So that pretty much takes all the fun out of that. Kind of hard.
That's one way to put it, I guess.
About a hand grenade rolling underneath the table somewhere. Okay. But it's funny. We went to Marseille, France. All right. So
I've been to Marseille. Very nice, beautiful place.
The ship itself was in Toulon. We got on a train, went to Marseille as part of our scouts. So we get off the train station in Marseille, and I walk out the glass doors, and the first thing I see on the little half wall, as soon as you exit out the doors, is this big communist hammer and sickle poster right there on the wall. And I told the guys, and I was laughing at them. I turned around to my guys as they were coming out behind me. I said, yeah, guys, look, and I pointed at the sign. I think we found them. And I took pictures. I still got pictures of that. I took a picture of that little paper poster that was on the wall. But like I said, our job was to go get on the train, run back and forth all the way to the Italian border and come back. And if we saw any signs of these people, make a mark of it, where they were, what they were doing, and report it back. And I'm like, okay. And it wasn't just us. Everybody who was eligible to go on liberty was in the same category. So bosun's mates, engineering, ops, whatever. If they went on liberty, they went out in groups of 5 or 6, and they did the same scouting missions that we did. Okay, that's kind of how it went. But and it got crazy even later, because on that trip we went to this little out of the way city, little small seacoast city there in Greece, and they hadn't seen Americans in like forever. So we get in there, and again, it's the same drill. Okay, you guys are going to go ashore. This is your designated time and day and time to go. When you get out there, if you see any of these people, report it, so on and so forth. And the second day we were there, I was, my crew was scheduled to go. So our boss came up and he told us, he said, we just found out that they're scheduled to have a Communist Party rally in the town square. Your job is to go out there and scout them out and make sure they don't get too crazy. He said the local police and all that are going to be there. He said, but it's in our American national interest to find out what's going on with these people. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going out there in civilian clothes, no weapons, and you want me to play scout for a bunch of maybe, possibly dangerous, violent, communist rally protesters? I said, do I have stupid written on my forehead? My boss said, no, but that's orders. I'm sorry.
Man, that sounds like CIA stuff. That's CIA stuff all over it, man.
I don't know, but
that's crazy.
It was stupid. But
hey, Terrence, was that Suda Bay, Greece?
No, Kalamata.
Oh, dude, good olives. But wow, you went to Kalamata. Nice,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I didn't get to see much of it, but a couple of restaurants. That's about all I got time for.
And
so, cool.
So when you go through that, and at what point do you retire then?
Well, that's the funny part about it. So as a reservist, you do your time, okay?
Right.
Now, in this case, as a reservist, I picked up, and you can stay in a little bit longer than you normally would, sort of. Okay. So after Afghanistan, because we got extended, and we were only supposed to do 6 months, but we knew we were going to get extended. And so when the orders came through, it was no real surprise. So here we are. So my command sergeant major showed up at our forward outpost, about halfway through the tour. And he come up to me, one evening, and he told me, he said, Sergeant, he said, with this extension puts you over the 18-year mark. So as a reservist, if you volunteer for it, you can continue on and stay on active duty. I'm like, excuse me? He said, yeah. And he showed me this reserve hand manual, and it had a thing about Title 10 stuff in it. And, he showed me this paragraph. He said, now, I didn't tell you this, okay? Because we're not supposed to tell you guys this. If you find out on your own, you want to volunteer for it, we can't stop you, but you didn't hear this from me. And I'm like, okay, Sergeant Major, what are you trying to tell me? He said, if you want to stay and pick up your 20 years of active duty, you can sign a paper and they have to keep you. I'm like, oh, okay. And I had to think about that. Is this what I really want to do? And to be honest with you, I had no idea what I was getting into. It sounded good to me. I had a choice between staying in the reserves, doing my time, and then getting out, and then wait till I'm 60 to collect money, which in my case, I probably would have, because the amount of active duty time that I had, I would have gotten really, really close to my normal active duty 20-year entitlement anyway. So when we got to Kabul on the way up to go back home, I got to see the next higher level command, the 352nd KCOM Sergeant Major. Okay, now he's the big guy. So my Sergeant Major took me in to see him, and he told me the same thing. And he said, if you want to do this, we can't stop you. And, and he explained to me the rules and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, well, I'm usually pretty aggressive. When you tell me I shouldn't be doing something and it means money in my pocket, I'm thinking I should probably do this. So I went ahead and signed the papers.
Nice.
The worst part was got stateside and nobody knew anything about it. Either that or they were just keeping mum because they really didn't want me to do this. So I'm like, okay, I had already signed the papers and I got the battalion commander to sign them. He was leaving anyway, so he didn't care. But it's like, all right, so now what? So we got back to the, home base here in Tennessee, and I'm trying to figure out how to make this work, and nobody knows anything. So I'm calling Fort Bragg, and nobody knows anything. So finally, I found this sergeant major up at PERSCOM in Alexandria, Virginia. Oh, he knew all about it. He was in charge of the program. I'm like, okay. Well, my intention was to stay right there in Tennessee. I would stay on active duty, AGR, okay, active guard and reserve, for my time until I hit 20, and then that's it. So my intent was to do that right where I was at. I wasn't planning on transferring anywhere. But a sergeant major up there had better ideas.
Uh-huh.
He was about determined he was going to get his own personal workforce. I'm like, what? And the thing was, if nothing else, they could have sent me over to Fort Bragg where I'd still be working in my MOS. But no, this guy had different ideas. So he said that the only way he would allow me, and this is his words, the only way he would allow me into the program, even though I had a signed paper which says you can't refuse me, he told me that the only way he would allow me into the program is I had to come up there to Alexandria, Virginia, and go to work for him. And I'm like, well, what would I do up there? It's PERSCOM. I don't know the first thing about admin, working. I'm a mechanic. What do I know? Oh, we'll find you something. I'm like, excuse me? You're going to find me something? That sounded pretty dubious. And I thought, well, you know what? He's a sergeant major. I better not fight with this. Don't fight it. So I carried my butt up to Alexandria, Virginia. They told me what uniform to put on, Class Bs, and report for work. They didn't have a job for me. I'm like, what? You don't have a job for me? Well, go report to this other master sergeant down on the next floor down and see if he can find you something to do. I'm like, so you brought me all the way up here from a job that I already had down there. I was at the 489th. They were perfectly willing to let me go to work in the motor pool. They were all set for me to go take charge of the motor pool. They needed somebody there, AGR, to manage all their assets. But instead, I go up there and I have no job. So I report to this 77 Fox, I think he was, 77 MOS something. And he's an admin guy. He's a personnel sergeant. And he takes one look at me, he takes a look at my MOS, and he says, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm supposed to come work for you." He's like, "Well, what do you know how to do?" I said, "Well, I know I'm a jack of all trades. I know how to do all kinds of things in the trades." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm an air conditioning tech. I'm a 63 Bravo. I work on Humvees, trucks. I know how to fix air conditioners. I'm a 52 Charlie." I said, "I'm an electrician. I'm all, that's what I do." He said, "We ain't got none of that here." I said, "Oh yeah, I know that." He says, "Well, why are you looking for me?" I said, "Because Sergeant Major upstairs says I need to come work for you. I don't have anything for you to do." I'm like, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" "Well, go to that empty desk over there, and if I need you for something, I'll let you know." So I went that way for several weeks. I'd show up in the morning, read newspaper, piddle around. He'd let me go about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd go to the gym, work out, and that was it. That was my day. Well, somebody else took that wind that I didn't have a job down there. So they told the master sergeant, "Find me something." So one day he come up and he asked me, he says, "You know anything about computers?" I'm like, "A little bit. I mean, you have to know a little bit." Okay. I said, "I know a little bit. That's about it." He said, "I can type my name in on a word spreadsheet." "Okay, you're qualified." I'm like, "Excuse me?" I'm like, "What?" So he started citing me simple database kind of tasks, stupid stuff. So I'm like, "All right, whatever, And I had no idea what I was doing, really. I just followed his instructions and typing on the keyboard and doing stuff. I had no idea what I was doing. So it looked like I was busy. So about a week or so after that, I started doing that. He got this other guy in, same thing. He was going to be another one of those Title 10 guys. And he was a photographer. He was an Army photographer. The guys that go up into planes and shoot pictures of the battlefields and stuff. Well, that was his job. And they put him to work down there doing the same thing I was doing. Literally nothing. And
Wow.
so this master sergeant is now going to find busy work for the two of us. And I'm thinking, this is just insane. So I'm like, all right, well, they decided that since I was there not really busy, that I could get into some leadership schools. So they signed me up for BNOC and ANOC and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, okay, no problem. But that's when the political stuff started happening. So the guys upstairs above my sergeant major, the other sergeant majors up there on the top floor found out that, hey, we got a 38 Alpha sitting down there doing nothing, signing up to go to BNOC. What's up with that? Why is he here? He shouldn't even be here. So my sergeant major got in trouble. The warrant officer he worked for got in trouble because it wasn't just me. They were dragging people from Fort Bliss and everywhere else, dragging them all the way up to, Alexandria, Virginia, to go to work at, Walter Reed Hospital, doing nothing over there, and handling funeral services and stuff like that, stupid stuff, nothing to do with our MOSs, only because this sergeant major, he needed this stuff, but instead of drawing on what he's supposed to be drawing on, he's pulling all these AGR guys, Title 10s, from everywhere in the country and bringing them up there on orders. Of course, the government's paying for that, and having them do stupid stuff when we should have been saving the government money and staying at where we were and finishing our time. So, like I said, him and a warrant got in trouble for abusing funds, to say the least. And the command sergeant major at USACAPOC out of Fort Bragg got a deal. He got to make a deal, bring me down to Fort Bragg, which I ended up doing admiral work down there too. But at least it was with people in my MOS. There was something to that. But still, I mean, I spent 18 months in that program before they let me retire, and I was miserable. I really was. It was miserable. it was political in every which way you could think of, and people doing stupid stuff. And I'm thinking, why are you wasting my time? When I could be doing something productive.
Right.
Really, it would just bother me really badly. So, like I said, once I finally so the other part of that was that while I was at Fort Bragg, my old unit commander, it was a major that I had gone to Afghanistan with, 489th got redeployed to Iraq in 2003. So 11 months after we got back from Afghanistan, they're turning right around and going over to Iraq this time. So he tried to find out where I was at, and we ran into each other at Fort Bragg. He invited me to lunch with his new team, and he said, "Sergeant," I said, "is there anything I can do to get you to be my team sergeant again?" I'm like, "I'd go with you in a heartbeat, Major. I really would. Sign me up right now. Get me out of this hellhole." But unfortunately, they got me locked down. I said, I'm not going anywhere. I wish I could. I'd go with you right now, but they won't let me. And he's like, ugh. So I saw him 6 months later after he came back, and I'm sure they had a pretty rough time over there. Because, civil affairs, you're right out there, right in the front lines, right in the middle of everything. And he didn't tell me what happened over there, but I could see it on his face. He had that special stare that we know all about, and he wasn't talking to people. And I know that was his first real combat mission in that regard, where he was probably getting shot at and dealing with IEDs, and he may have even lost some people. I don't know. But I could tell in his face that something like that happened, just from seeing him at the quartermasters, dropping his gear off. I said, I asked him how he was doing, but he didn't say much, and I left it at that. I thought, oh my God, I wish I could have gone with him, because there's a good chance, because he was very inexperienced. Despite going to Afghanistan for a year, he was still very inexperienced. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm a combat vet. I probably could have done him better if I had been able to go with it. But, circumstances being what they were,
right.
And like I said, I retired in 2004, and I couldn't get out of Fort Bragg fast enough.
That's when I joined the Marine Corps, was 2004 when you retired.
Yeah. As soon as I got clear, I packed everything up. We were renting a house here in Fayetteville, and we packed everything up, and I had already made arrangements. We got on the highway, and I headed as far north as I could go. My family was from Rusty County, Maine, like I said earlier. So that's where I was headed. I grew up on a farm that was pretty close to the border, but I didn't go quite that far north this time. I went to a little town called Caribou, and found a little house, planted a flag out in the front yard, started a repair business, and did good for 10 years. Unfortunately, between everything that I did in the Army and the Navy, and doing a repair business where you're moving a lot of heavy stuff around, my knee finally gave out, and the doctor said that you can't be doing this anymore. You need to find a new job. And I had grown up kids living in Texas. So in 2015, I sold my house, packed everything up, and went to Central Texas. I figured, well, Fort Hood's right there. That's close enough for me to get my benefits and enjoy the commissary and all that kind of stuff. And I had one veteran son that was living in Houston, another veteran son that was living in El Paso. And I thought, well, you know what? Central Texas, obviously Killeen was not the place to live. And it didn't take long for me to move a little bit farther south. We managed to buy a house a little bit north of Austin. And, I planted a flag there for 5 years. But, the idea was I got a job, and it wasn't bad until they, closed up doors. Of course, I had to go find another one. But it wasn't that bad. But at the same time, I thought to myself, I'm in the middle. I got one son on this side, another son on the other side, and when I go visit, I'm halfway in between. And I got Fort Hood an hour north. If I need something, I can go. The best part was they had a VA outpatient clinic right there in Austin. So, 20-minute drive for me to go get my VA healthcare done. And life wasn't bad. until it got bad. Things started going haywire in 2020. Part of it was COVID. It tore things up there in Texas. People went really squirrely, didn't know what to do with themselves, doing really stupid stuff. And, with me being 50% of my 100% disability is PTSD. And my symptoms are, one, I don't do crowds at all. You don't get me in a crowded place because I'm gonna do some stuff. And the other part of it is I don't do stupid humans either. Okay. And I don't care if you're the only one in the store. If you're behaving like a stupid idiot, something bad's going to happen to you if you get close to me. So like I said, with COVID pandemic going on, we kind of kept closed doors, didn't go out much other than the grocery store when we could, and so on and so forth. And, I got to watch the circus go on around us. But
Right.
Some other things happened. So like I said, my wife and I decided at that point, Texas was not the place to be. A lot of bad things were happening. A lot of people coming in there from California, tearing the place up and making the environment really bad, as in water quality was making us sick. Electricity was having brownouts, all kinds of bad things. And she had some family issues that came up that year. We decided, let's go to Virginia. So off we went.
Okay.
Now we've been here 3 years and we love it.
Awesome.
I've done, I worked for a little while when we first got here. Once I got to be 66 and a half, the government said, well, you're on Medicare now, which I fought tooth and nail to get on because I really like my TRICARE Prime. But they said, no, you're 65. You can't have that anymore. You got to go on Medicare and we'll give you TRICARE for life. I'm like, okay, but I got to pay a lot more money for Medicare. Well, that's too bad. That's the law. I'm like, okay. Yeah, I actually got in an argument with some lady at the federal government over Medicare. I got to fight with her over the phone because I did not want to sign up for Medicare. She said, well, do you have health insurance where you work? I said, well, I didn't sign up for it because it's a lot more expensive than TRICARE Prime. She said, okay, so since you don't have any medical benefits from your civilian job, you have to take Medicare at 65. I'm like, okay. That's when I started yelling. But like I said, it didn't go anywhere. She yelled back and said, you ain't got no choice. So anyway, 66 and a half, where I was working for the state of Virginia, the job I had was disappearing. They didn't have any use for me anymore. I had the option to bug out or transfer to another agency. And I thought to myself, okay, so I'm at the age now where I can sign up for my full Social Security benefit. I've hit that time, and I'm collecting 100% disability from the VA. I've got my Army retirement pension. I put it all together. I said, you know what? Why don't I just retire rather than transfer it to another state agency? Why don't I just go home? Okay. So, nobody really cared. They let me go and end of discussion. Now, it doesn't mean I haven't stayed busy. Just because I'm retired, I'm collecting all this government money, I still do the occasional IT gig work. Matter of fact, I've got a little project coming up here in a couple of weeks for a gig company that I've been working for 3 years. I got another company that occasionally throws me a bone. So I'll go out and do a job for somebody on site, maybe refurbish a computer, install some equipment, do some kind of stuff. I've gone to post offices and installed big printers and hooked them up to the network and, Dell refreshes and, hooked up equipment at CarMax and all kinds of stuff. Like I said, jobs last 1 day, 2 days, sometimes 3, but that's it. When I'm done, I go home and I get my money and I'm gone. And then meanwhile, when I'm not doing that kind of stuff, because that stuff is kind of few and far between, and to be honest with you, because I'm not willing to travel very far, it's even fewer and far between. I'm doing this remote podcasting stuff here. I got 2 podcasts a week. They don't make any money, but it keeps me busy. And it's good therapy for me because, and in my case, not being busy is like a death sentence.
Yeah.
And my thing is, because I don't do stupid human tricks very well, I get angry at the world. So the one podcast I do on Wednesdays allows me to, in a gentle way, get my anger out at the world and tell people on a podcast, hey, you're stupid, okay? I don't tell them that like that, but I do it in a journalistic manner and such that I use a lot of really nice, good words, but basically I tell people, yeah, you're being stupid, okay? And it's good therapy.
That's excellent that you found an outlet to help you mentally deal with people as a whole.
I'm not out of the woods because back in 2007, I was off the charts. Okay, I went home in late 2004, 2005, struggled, and I had anger management issues like you wouldn't believe. First 3 years I was home, and I want to say the summer of 2006, I think, so like 2006, 2007, I almost lost my family. I was so out of control that Child Services was getting ready to take my child away from me. My then wife was like deathly afraid of me, and I was causing chaos out in public. I was getting in fights in grocery store parking lots, running people off roads, doing all kinds of stuff. And I was out of control, basically. So like I said, the social worker came to my house one day, and as I was in the process of throwing her out of my house, she told me that I needed to get some help, and that there was a vet counseling center on the other side of town that they would be more than glad to talk to me. Well, after I got done throwing her out of the house, I realized that, wait a minute, she's government. She basically could come in and totally disrupt my house. So maybe I ought to take her advice. So, being a self-employed kind of guy, I took some time in my schedule, and I went over there to the local vet center and sat down with their lead counselor. And I told him, I says, I'm just here to pick up some brochures, yada, yada, yada. I don't know. He said, well, the fact that you're actually here is a start. He said, would you mind letting me interview you for a few minutes? Let's find out where you are. So he had this little office that had one door on it and windows with shades. So right away, I'm anxious. I'm like, all right. So I took a chair, sat right next to the door. And he went to the opposite side of the small room and sat in his chair, asked me a whole lot of questions, which to this day, I can't remember what they were. And at the end of the question period, he reached behind him and pulled out this thick gray book, and it's had PTSD symptoms on the front of it. And he told me, he said, Sergeant, he said, you have almost every symptom in this book. And this book was probably about an inch thick. He said, you need to come see us. You really don't have a choice. You need to come see us. We're starting now once a week so we can help you get through this before you end up in jail. I'm like, okay. That was an eye-opener. And at that point, I really paid attention, and I started to go and see them guys. And I was in once a week therapy with them guys for like 5 years. When they said, okay, we've helped you as much as we can. You are always going to have certain symptoms. We've taught you how to mitigate them, get around them, function in life, so on and so forth. But, keep us on speed dial. And I have ever since. So even when I moved to Texas, I checked in with the local vet center there in Austin, Texas, let them know I was there, and said, hey, I'm on a maintenance kind of schedule. If I have an issue, can I call you? They said, oh, yeah, no problem. Call us. We'll try to set you up. If you feel like you're in crisis, you let us know, and we'll get you in even sooner. Meanwhile, we'll do maintenance checks on you whenever you feel like it and go from there. And that worked out. Now here in Virginia, I did the same thing. I registered with a local vet counseling center in Richmond. And once a month, some guy calls me up, and he's a former Marine. He got hit in Iraq, is all banged up. He's pretty disabled, but he's a vet counselor. And he calls me once a month for a checkup. Matter of fact, he's going to be calling me tomorrow. and he does just a wellness check that makes sure that I'm still functioning and I'm not doing stupid stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, the VA put me through all of their mental health programs, and they were all object failures. Every bit of their mental health programming has been a massive failure today. But the vet counselors, on the other hand, have been a huge help. For what it's worth. They help me out more than all the the college and medical specialists and psychologists and psychoanalysts and Babel scientists and whatever they want to call themselves. They were useless.
Yeah.
Vet counselors, on the other hand, with minimal college degrees and just licensed counselors, they were more help than anything.
Terrence, I have to agree with you on that. I too went through the same problem, 100% PTSD. I went through like it's every month I got a different counselor, and the VA was not helping. And I finally had to go and to group therapy. And that really kind of opened up, my eyes of the whole, we're sitting in a circle talking about it. Also, I'm an alcoholic, 6 years sober. It'll be in July.
Congratulations.
But yeah, I mean, Terrence, the VA, it took me a long time to get over that. It took me about 11 years of counseling and all that kind of stuff, because I was in a bad way too. Like when I got out, I didn't see as much stuff as you did. I just did 3 deployments, 2 in Iraq and then 1 on a Navy ship. But it messed me up pretty bad. Huh?
Those two in Iraq are enough.
Yeah, because while you were, where were you in the summer of 2006?
2006, I was in Caribou, Maine.
Okay. In 2006, that summer, I was in Ramadi, Iraq, and dealing with, because you've been, sounds like you've been to pretty much every place I've ever been to, way before me. And so it messed me up bad. And I had a college degree, and I enlisted, and I'm glad I wasn't an officer, but I'm glad I did my time. And I'm glad you and I, we share very similar stories. I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, oh, I'm okay. I dealt with that. I have an ex-wife. I have bad credit. I have a DD-214 where we must be veterans.
Yeah.
And you saw combat. I saw combat. You were in Vietnam. My uncle was in Vietnam. I give you guys a lot of props. Welcome home. Thank you for your service. My uncle's 80 years old. I just saw him last weekend in Kentucky. He was Signal Corps. He was a second lieutenant, and he was in Vietnam 68 to 71.
Okay.
And I give you guys a lot of props. You guys.
Yeah, my dad went to Vietnam in 65, 66.
My dad was a lieutenant commander in the Navy at Whidbey Island. He never went to Vietnam, but he was at Whidbey Island from 68 to 71, same time as my uncle was over in Vietnam. It was just crazy. And
So
the funny
I have.
sorry,
go ahead,
Carolee.
I was going to say, Terrence, I have a question. So going back to your father. So when you first came back from your first, when you went back, how did that go?
Let me tell you a little bit about my dear old dad. Okay. My dad was a World War II vet. He went to the Philippines to fight the Japanese in 1945. Then he, did the peacetime stuff. In 1951, they sent him to Korea. So he spent a year in Korea during the Korean War. So then, all of that messed him up really bad.
Right.
He was 16 years old when he went to World War II. Him and my uncle, who was a year older, they were desperate to get away from the really bad, living situation they were at up there in Washburn, Maine. So they enlisted and lied about their ages. And my uncle went to the Navy. My dad ended up in the Army Infantry and in the Philippines. So my dad got blown up with a Japanese hand grenade when he was 16.
Wow.
He was underage. So he was 17 by the time he got out of the hospital, all that kind of stuff. So a year after he gets basically cashiered out for being underage, they drafted him because he was 18 now. So he couldn't catch a break.
Right.
He stayed in and went to Korea, and that messed him up. And then, as I said, because he was career 65, they sent him to Vietnam, and he was gone for a year. But the big thing was he was crazy as a loon, a raging alcoholic, never stopped, smoked like a chimney, and it killed him. He died when he was 62. So the big thing was growing up with all that chaos was why I ran away from home. My brother, my younger brother, wasn't quite so lucky. But that's a whole nother deal. So you got to understand, coming from that kind of background, I didn't want to be like him.
Right.
But I almost ended up like him, because this is one thing the vet counselor told me. She told me, she said, you just didn't get PTSD from your trip to Afghanistan. You've been accumulating PTSD since you went to Vietnam and got shot up over there, and it's been getting up in you ever since then. She said,
right.
All these places you went to, you got shot at, and maybe you shot back, maybe you didn't, whatever. It didn't really matter. The fact that you were under duress, as she called it, okay, all those years, it just accumulated on you. So
yeah.
She showed me a chart where she mapped it out, a progressive chart of PTSD symptoms going back from when I was 18 and 19 and ramping up until I went to Afghanistan. The only thing that really saved me from having issues in the military was the fact that I could turn off all that stuff as long as I had a uniform on and I was under orders to do something. I could lock it down and I was good. As long as I was wearing a uniform, I could lock it all away, and I never had an issue while I was, being a soldier. It was when I was not being a soldier that all the demons got out and all the help.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you were trained to compartmentalize all of your emotions and feelings and just follow orders. And that's all you had to actually think about was whatever that order was and completing that mission.
All I had to worry about was bringing everybody home safe. That was my number one job. And, I didn't focus I didn't really focus too much on anything else.
Yeah.
Despite being all kinds of crazy stuff out there. I mean, 2002, Big Army was down south. We were up in the northeast part. There was our team, which consisted of 6 people, and we had a small ODA team living across the street. And there was about maybe almost 24 of them guys. We were the only white guys in the whole northeast part of Afghanistan back in 2002. So we were severely, severely outnumbered.
Right. So was your dad alive when you went back home that first time after you had been?
My dad died in early 1990.
Okay. And how was he with that at that time? I mean, was he, I guess, what was his thoughts at that point that now that you had already been in?
Yeah. Well, the big thing was first time I went home was 1982. Mm-hmm. Okay. I had been gone for a long time. And I went home and saw the family, 82, introduced them to grandchildren for the first time and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't get to stay very long. So again, that whole time between 1982 and 1986, I only made a couple of trips up home. Okay. So we didn't really connect that well, a little bit, but not much, as far as it goes. But then when I was in Great Lakes, I made a couple of trips back home, and 1989 was the last one I made, but just before he died. And at that point, that's when he came to me and he said, he told me about what happened to him in the Philippines in 1945. Now
he was able to open up to you then.
Well, to talk to me about it because he knew that I had seen stuff. Okay.
Yep.
And so we had a long talk, but I knew that he was very poor. Health was very, very poor at this point. Okay. I knew that he probably wasn't going to be around too much longer. Of course, my mother told me that too. But at the same time, I thought, so like I said, we had a conversation. He told me what happened to him in 1945, a little bit about Korea, and told me some more about, Vietnam and stuff like that. Like you said, he was kind of getting it off his chest. And then about 4 months after that, he died.
I'm sorry that had happened and that you had such a childhood like you did, but to be able to be there for him and allowing him to have that conversation with you about his military time and you to him about your military time, I think it's what I'm seeing. And of course, I'm no doctor, I'm no anything, but is that for the vets that I have talked with, the veterans that I've actually had on the show, it's a lot of, once they get it out, it's like a big weight lifted off the shoulders.
Right.
And not to say that it doesn't start to build back up if they don't continue to talk, but a lot of them have said that it's time to get those stories out. Right. Because generationally, those stories are going to start going away, and the younger generation isn't going to understand. They're not going to know any of this. And right. This is our history.
Well, see, that's the other bad part about this is that because of some of the places that I went to and the missions that I had to do when I was there, I'll never be able to talk about those things. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
Okay? So, I could say, well, I was in the area of this place. I was in the Persian Gulf in 1992. I can't tell you what I was doing there, but I was there. That's all I can tell you.
And it was not fun. Right. And those kinds of things depended upon.
Yeah. A little bit of fun, but
yeah. But the stories, just to be able to share them, to get them out in the open for you not to be, or any veteran as a whole, to be holding that to themselves and just weighing on them so much and causing so much angst is important. I think that communication, getting it out, not just, if you don't feel comfortable talking to your spouse or somebody that close, because you don't want them looking at you at a different light.
No, I tried that. I got that exact, just what you just said. I got that like, oh my God.
Yeah. But it doesn't, I think it's just because, again, we've not been there, right? I'm not a veteran. I have two Marine sons, and so not a veteran, but for me, having this particular channel is the only way I really know how to honor our veterans and give you a place that you can tell your story, whatever that story is and however you want to say it.
Yeah, what you were saying earlier, the only person that I ever gave any details to, and even her, I couldn't give classified information, obviously, but she was an Air Force reservist. She was my veterans counselor. Okay. The first one I went to back in 2007. Now I could talk to her because she was serving and she understood everything, and being a counselor, being a military veteran and a counselor, I could open up to her and all the stuff that I couldn't talk to my wife about, I couldn't talk to my dad about, and all the other stuff I could talk to her about. So it's like you said, with her, I opened up and let all this stuff go. And over the course of a couple of years, and, we got it all out of me. And so, I went from up here to down here.
Right. As my friend Lee Deckelman says, that internal volume has gone from a 10 down to, a 3 or a 4. Yeah. Yeah. So are you aware of any resources outside of the VA for veterans there in Virginia? I would assume, being in Virginia, there's quite a few.
Well, there probably are, but I don't like them.
You don't like them?
No. So, and again, it's all about that military mindset. Okay.
Absolutely.
The Veterans Administration to me is like an arm of the military. So I go to them for whatever I need. In this case, the vet counselor is, again, another arm of the VA, which I equate to DOD. So to me, they're all in the same group. I'm good with them people. But any kind of civilian organization. So I'll give you an example. When I first got out, when I was out processing at Fort Bragg in 2004, somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, would you like to sign up to, be a member of the American Legion?" I'm like, "Okay, yeah." My dad was VFW, American Legion. So I thought, yeah, why not? Let me see what happens. Well, I didn't stay in Fayetteville very long, so I transferred up to Maine. So I had them transfer all my stuff, the American Legion, up to Maine. So I went to the American Legion post in Caribou, and they signed me up, and everything was great. But most of what them guys were involved with, I had no interest in whatsoever. It was just a bunch of old guys running around drinking beer in a smoky lounge doing their ceremonies. And I thought to myself, what? No, there's no purpose here. You know what I mean? These guys aren't doing anything. So I got involved with them, though, because I became their repair guy. And having a appliance repair business, I serviced all their beer equipment and cooling equipment, air conditioning, and all that stuff. And being part of the American Legion post, and all that, it was all good. They trusted me. I trusted them for that. And we're all happy campers. But that's as far as I ever went with that. So I did join. I transferred from Maine and joined up with an American Legion unit down near Pflugerville, Texas, where I was living. Those were a great bunch of guys. Okay. I loved doing things with them. They were always out in the community doing all kinds of stuff, very involved with Veterans Affairs, all that kind of stuff. And I loved it. Then I got here to Virginia, and they told me, well, transfer from your post 154 in Pflugerville to the local post where I'm living here in Virginia. And they said everything will be okay. Well, I went to some of their little shindigs over there, and them guys were like the guys up in Caribou. They have their own thing going on. Everybody knows everybody. He's known as everybody for years. I'm an outsider. They didn't really care for me that much and all this. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm done. So
Wow.
officially, as far as the American Legion National is concerned, I'm still assigned to Post 154 in Pflugerville, Texas. And even though I'm unable to do anything with them guys, I'm still on their email list. I still chat with them and stuff like that. And I have nothing to do with these guys here in Virginia.
Interesting. Because we're finding, and that's one of the things that I look forward to is resources outside of the VA, because every veteran is aware of the VA. And for some, they look for, or I guess some resources, their purpose is to get veterans out of their heads and, into nature or finding their team, whatever that may be. So, and they're coming up with some really out of the box ideas, which have seemed to really help quite a bit of veterans. Angry Sarge, welcome. Thank you. Also, Chaboy, thank you for showing up tonight. Appreciate that. So it's interesting to see. And as I find these or hear from them, different veteran resources, I put them out there in the links and for it. So
kind of an idea. I've heard programs where they take guys up in the mountains, hike up in the mountains, and go out on trails and all that. And the biggest thing I noticed is that all the guys who sign up for that are in their 20s and 30s. And I'm like, well, I'm in my 50s and 60s. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go for that.
So there is a group that is out of North Carolina, and they do 6 trips a year, and anywhere, several hundred miles over a weekend.
Wow.
And over, what's that?
Are they rucking it?
No, they're actually like 4-wheeling. So they, the trucks and stuff like that. So they will go through a lot of different areas, and there will be an endpoint, but they'll sleep. A lot of them have those campers or pop-up things over the top of their vehicles, and sleep there, or they'll sleep in their vehicle overnight. But it's called Mind Overland. And this particular group actually, over last Veterans Day weekend, had invited myself and my husband to go because it's the one time out of the entire year that they allow for outsiders, so people other than veterans only. So that it allows for their families, veteran families. It allows for friends and supporters of veterans as well. So we went, and I can tell you, there were, of course, the younger generation of veterans there, but there also was a lot of older generation of veterans that went. Gosh, we met a lot, and quite a bit actually, and just all in all, wonderful people. There was probably that day or that weekend, over Veterans Day weekend in North Carolina, there was probably close to 150 veterans, and then of course their families. And the founders are, gosh, I hate to put an age because I don't want to offend anybody if I'm wrong. But so I mean, they're in their 50s, 60s, dependent, some a little earlier. And they've been, in a lot of, they range from Navy to Air Force to, so it just dependent. But they're a really great group. And I've been able to find several different groups like that. So things like therapy, both with horses and veterans, right? So horses that have been saved.
Texas had some of that.
Yeah, and so it's again thinking outside of that normal box to find things to help our veterans be able to connect with something, right? Even if it's not a counselor per se. So, and then there is here in Tennessee, there is, let's see if I can find it, Warrior Rounds. And Warrior Rounds, if you've been into Tennessee or lived here, you're familiar with where Nashville is.
Yep.
And so the gentleman who created Warrior Rounds is also a veteran, and he gets with country music songwriters, and they have veterans come in and tell their story, and these songwriters write that veteran's story into a song.
Well, I don't think I heard do that.
So it's really quite interesting, and so you can go out to YouTube and look up Warrior Rounds and see the different videos. They'll do an actual video of them. In fact, Andrew had one done as well. So his is out there. So you would type in under YouTube, you'd say Warrior Rounds Andrew Farrer, and it would come up. So a lot of interesting different resources.
Well, North Carolina sounds interesting because I've got a Class C motorhome. That's kind of what my wife and I have our retirement gift. You know what I mean? When I retired, we decided we wanted to do some traveling, and I don't do airplanes and hotels, so we decided an RV was the best thing for us, and we kind of go where we want to go when we want to go.
The biggest thing with their trips is it's a lot of overlanding. So it's a lot of the Jeeps and things of that nature. Now, not to say, because again, I'm not sure. I know that for their Veterans Day trip, it's in the North Carolina mountains, beautiful up there. They may have room for you actually to bring your motor home, excuse me. But you can check them out, mindoverland.org, and check them out online. And you can, again, sign up for it. It's to go for Veterans Day weekend is absolutely free. They will bring in, I think it would be, so if you got there, say Friday, and then that Saturday, they'll bring in coffee, the little kiosks or little like food trucks. And then that night they'll do a bonfire, giveaways, etc. They had a speaker, and it's really a great time of bonding for veterans. It's amazing to see the number of people and then the family.
I mean, I've got a 4-wheel drive F-150, but my wife would not be really comfortable with that.
You're right. I know. I have some back issues, so we had the opportunity. They did have some trails. They have, I think, a total like 3 or 4 different trails, and then that are fairly easy. And then they've got another trail that is complete 4-wheeling and really rocky or sideways, and But I have some back stuff, so it was like, I think I'll hang out here at the camp.
My biggest thing is I've got arthritis in almost every joint now from my military service. And that's the one thing the VA told me was that, everything got accumulated, yada, yada, yada. And they told me when I out-processed in 2004 that my osteoarthritis, which they noticed on the x-rays, they said it's only going to get worse and there's no cure for it. Well, they were right. Over the last 20 years, it's gotten a lot worse. So I can't do near the things that I could do even 10 years ago. 4-wheeling, no, not going to happen.
Right. But, even if you just go, and you can go there for Veterans Day weekend, you don't have to go on any trails. But if you take your truck, you can go on some of the easier, flatter ones. So check them out. That's Mind Overland. Some great people, and I think you would really enjoy it.
I mean, not that far for me, so.
Right. Yeah. Also, Andrew wanted me to let you know that you're a great man and you're a true warrior. He was sorry he had to cut out early. He is going to help on, actually, I think he was going to get dinner cooked. So
copy that.
Absolutely a pleasure. Now, before I let you go, I want to throw out there for my chat people, if you guys have any questions at all for Terrence, go ahead and get them in the chats for me. Terrence, do you have any thoughts or anything you would want to say to the next generation of military?
Well, I would say that the esprit de corps should still be there, okay? Don't pay any attention to all them civilians out there and all this crap that they're throwing at you. I've been hearing a lot of stories here lately about how the MAGA movement is infiltrating the military and stuff like that. And I would say, don't pay any attention to it, okay? Just do what you're told, do what you're supposed to do. Don't pay any attention to all the civilians out there. Do your job. And that applies when you're not on duty. If you're on liberty somewhere, don't pay any attention to them people, because no matter what you may think, you signed a contract for X amount of time, and that means 24/7, 365 days a year, you're on duty, whether you're wearing civilian clothes or not. So as an old sergeant, I'm telling you, don't pay any attention to that stuff, because it's just going to get you in trouble. The second thing is that no matter what happens, no matter what you get into, always, and this is what we always stress, take care of your buddies, okay? We always had a buddy system. Even when I was just a young E2, a sailor with an M14, I had a buddy, and we looked out for each other. And it's always been that way. So, no matter what we got ourselves into, we always knew that there was somebody there to watch our backs, and don't ever forget that. Okay. That's what your squad's for, and your unit's for, and so on and so forth. Most of that stops at the NCO ranks. Once you get above E5, it kind of filters out a little bit. I know how that is, but it's still, it is what it is. But either way, stay true and be good for that. And the rest of it, I mean, the only other thing I can add is sometimes you have no choice, even though you think it's a bad deal, you think it's bad, or you find out later they did something bad to you and you had no choice. Well, you know what? You got to shrug it off. And it's like we used to say, suck it up, because it's done.
Embrace the suck. Mm-hmm.
Embrace the suck. Okay. I mean, just to give you an example, one of the biggest things that's causing me most of my disabilities right now is this malaria medicine that they gave me to go to Afghanistan with. My whole unit took it. Methacquin Mondays. And anybody who ever went to Iraq, everybody in the early days went to Afghanistan, they all know what I'm talking about. Methacquin Mondays, once a week pill, no malaria, so on and so forth. Well, I'm telling you, that stuff messes a lot of people up, which is why they black boxed it and they stopped giving it out. But it's too late for guys like me. We took it. I got it twice. I got it once in the Persian Gulf and Desert Storm, and I got a second dose of it when I went to Afghanistan. So it has thoroughly messed me up, but I didn't have any choice. We had orders to take it. You didn't say no. And like the anthrax shots, my oldest son had the anthrax shots before he went overseas, and it messed him up, but he didn't have any choice. Sometimes just is how life it is. You get dealt a dirty stick, and you just got to go with it and hope the VA will take care of you on the other end. And
Right.
It sounds bad, but unfortunately, it's the real deal. It's just how life is.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you very much for your service, and of course, welcome home. Being in Vietnam, I don't know, did they treat you differently than most of the Vietnam veterans?
It's one of my biggest anger points when I first got out after Afghanistan was, being a Vietnam vet, and then a couple of things afterwards in Desert Storm and everything else. It was like Vietnam, they treated us like pariahs. Okay.
Right.
Not everybody's experienced that, but I didn't personally have anybody get in my face. But back in 1975, when I first came home, San Diego, there were signs up in La Jolla on the grass, sailors and Marines keep off the grass. Okay. And you go to the stores in Chula Vista and they have signs in the windows, sailors and Marines not allowed. We don't want your service. We won't serve you. That's what I came home to. And I thought, okay. And I'd already heard stories, you know what I mean? So it wasn't really super bad for me. Obviously, I just moved on to a store that would cater, would allow me to go in and buy something. But it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, thinking this is how America treats us when we're coming back. What's up with that? So segue, nearly 20 years later, I'm coming home from Afghanistan, and they couldn't do enough for us.
Right.
I get 2 year front of the, head of the line privileges for VA benefits as soon as we get back. And everybody's saying, thank you for your service. Oh, this and that and every other thing. And I'm thinking, well, where were you guys back in 1975? To me, there's no difference.
We've shifted, right? The different generations, we've learned to appreciate our veterans and what they have done, and passing that down to the younger generations. And because there's a huge difference from those in Vietnam who had no choice to go, right? The ones who were drafted. Right. And then you had those who went to Vietnam, of course, who volunteered. And but then after that, right, it's all volunteer. And I think that, I don't know that in my mind, it's not that they were mad at the Vietnam veterans. What they were mad at was the government, and that you were the face of the government at that point. So they didn't have a way of fighting man, right? So they took it on the Vietnam veterans, even though you guys had no choice as far as that went. Now, when Desert Storm and Shield and all of these came about at that point, it's all volunteer. Right. So it kind of turned things a little bit. It put things into a whole different perspective because they weren't being forced to go. I mean, it wasn't a draft. It was.
Yeah. The thing about Desert Storm was that all of us came back after being in the desert for 6 months, a year, or what have you. We got treated like, oh, it's just another deployment. You guys didn't do anything. Have a nice day. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. But then Afghanistan, it's like, oh my God, we got to give you guys a red carpet. Oh, we can't do enough for you. I'm like, okay, you're doing this now. Where were you all those other times?
Right. And the thing is that I guess the fact that we recognized there was a severe disconnect, and we're trying to fix it, right? I mean, there's only so many things that we as individuals can do.
Right.
And I know I've talked to a couple.
You know, my thing is, it wasn't the civilian life, the civilian population so much that bothered me. It was all of the veteran services people. It was the military coming out and saying, you get this because you went to OAF and all this. I'm like, why now? You know what I mean? Why now?
Right.
You know, and yes, obviously I noticed a strong uptick in people greeting me at Costco, Walmart, and all these other places. And I'm like, okay, that's nice. Have a nice life. I appreciate it. You know, all that kind of stuff. But to me, no, I was more angry at the military and the VA rolling out the red carpet. And I'm thinking, where were you guys, you know, before? How come you didn't take care of us before? Now you want to take care of us? There's something seriously wrong with that.
But we can't change history.
No, you can't. It is what it is.
Yeah, it is. And it's unfortunate that happened to you. And to any of our Vietnam and Vietnam era vets. So again, welcome home. Thank you for your service, your sacrifice. That means a lot to all of us who support our veterans. Of course, my following with this channel as well. So I don't see any additional comments out there. I do, or questions for you, Terrence, but I do want to say for anybody who hasn't already, please be sure to like, share, and comment after the show. And so we can make sure to keep you updated for any new veteran shows that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that is pretty much all I've got.
Okay.
So, Terrence, if you want to hang, what's that?
So I appreciate you letting me come on your show.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you. If you want to hang tight for me, we'll go ahead. We're going to get the outro going. Again, everybody, have a wonderful rest of the night, and thanks for joining.